Hi folks, welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. Joining me via Skype for the first time is Coleman Raphael. Coleman is a retired professor at George Mason University. Before that, he was president and board chairman at Atlantic Research Corporation. It's an executive search firm with about 5,000 employees, so I'm very happy he could join us for this live Q&A. Coleman is an author, and he's working on his second book, but we're here to talk about the premise of his first book. So Coleman, first of all, welcome, and if you could just tell us a little bit about your book, and we'll get started with the questions and answers.
Okay. The book is called One Businessman's Guide to Success, based on 44 Rules of Smart Management. And I can tell you a little bit, I probably should tell you a little bit about my background leading up to when I decided to write the book and then wrote it. What is in the book itself is not as significant as the things that led up to it. So if that's all right, I'll start out with a little bit of background as to leading up to why and how I wrote the book.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, well, I had a very satisfactory and an exciting childhood. I had an exceptional memory, and therefore I went through school very quickly, skipping classes, and soon I had an advanced degree and a doctorate, and I entered college at age 15. So then I started to work, and my first job was as a civil engineer, a structural engineer, Republic Aviation Corporation. So I taught some engineering for a while, and then at companies like Republic and Avco and Fairchild, I became the head of physics and then a program manager and then a chief engineer and a vice president, and finally CEO of Atlantic Research Corporation, which builds rockets and spacecraft, etc. The interesting thing about Atlantic Research was that when I joined them in 1970 as CEO, they had sales of $17 million and approximately 300 employees. 14 years later, when I retired, the sales were $400 million and we had 4,000 employees. So since that time, I've been a director or a chairman of many companies and many boards, and written lots of papers and journal articles. In 1986, I took the position as the dean of the business school at George Mason University, and it went very well until I retired in 1991, which was 5 years later. But during that time, I had the opportunity to have contact, a lot of contact, with many of the people who had previously worked for me. And I was somewhat amazed and happy and appreciative when they discussed what a wonderful experience it was and gave me various letters and certificates of appreciation and thank you notes for having given them the exposure in these kinds of jobs. And I decided around that time that I could probably write a book which would be anecdotal, but truthful and helpful to future employees of successful companies, people who want to work in companies and who can recognize that a company can set up an environment which makes them very happy and which makes the company very successfully. So this book, which was finally published after I was the dean at the business school, was published about 10 years ago. But the object was really twofold. One, to describe situations, anecdotes, situations and actual experiences which were very interesting and where you have a problem with a company, with hiring somebody or firing somebody or solving a technical problem, and you can sit down and solve these. And so the book, throughout the book, which is less than 200 pages, throughout it describes these different case histories and what the situation was. At the same time, the second thing that the book does is set up principles of operation. I call it 44 rules, but it's the things that had to be done in order to solve these problems, these situations that came up. So the book then is descriptive on various incidents, and then it shows what the company did in order to make those incidents successful. So in general, the book was meant to provide reading enjoyment, but at the same time simultaneously training readers in behavior which would lead to productive accomplishment.
Okay, well, what I want to do real quick, I want to show folks, if they want to check the book out, it's on Amazon.com, and anyone watching this has access to a computer and presumably Amazon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show Amazon, and what we can do is you can, let me minimize this, I apologize. You can actually do a look inside on the site, and his book's there. It's $19. He didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to do this to plug this thing here. This we've got right here. You can just click look inside, and then it will open it up, and you can check out the I guess it's the intro and some of these rules that Coleman Raphael is talking about. So I would encourage you to do that and check that out. And so why don't we do this? Why don't we get Coleman to let's talk about a couple of the rules, and then let's bring in some questions from folks. Coleman, I think you are muted. I think your mic is muted on your end. We're going to try to get his audio back for us.
Any better?
Yeah, that's better. All right, we're good.
I have Al Jacobs here. He just came over and he did things to the computer, and it gave a choice of one of which was unmute.
So he hit the right button. All right, so go ahead. Let's talk about a couple of these rules.
Okay. I call it 44 rules, but remember, in each one, what I've done is describe some kind of a situation and then discuss what it is one would have to do to solve that situation. And for example, the first rule, Rule 1, is even in a new era of high technology, profits are important. And I realized when shortly after I got into the company and suddenly had a bunch of employees and had to worry about things like stock and shares of stock and what the values were and who the shareholders were, that many people invest in companies and would buy the company because they hoped to make a profit on it. And therefore, one has to set up the realism in setting up a company as to what is it going to cost to do a job, how much are the customers going to pay in order to get the job done, and how much allowance do I have to make for things that will go wrong, because they will, if they can reach the point where the amounts that we're spending is more than the amount they're paying, and you don't want that to happen. And therefore, setting up rules like getting all employees to get enthusiastic about wanting to see the profit made. And because you say to them, we expect to turn out to do a better job than we would if you took the money and put it in the bank and just got interest on it. So you're going to get more than that. And if you can get, and here is a goal for the amount that we'd like to get, and if we can exceed that goal, we're going to be giving back some profit to our shareholders. And more than that, if we reach the point where we can do that, we're going to give all the employees here a bonus, which is a percentage of their salary, so they do as well as the shareholders, and everybody gets very happy at it. And so you set up Rule 1, and Rule 1 is merely stated, even in the new era of high technology, profits are important.
Okay, I know that your book is geared towards supervisors, and I'm going to throw it to Ben in a second in our Hangout with a question. but I know it's geared towards supervisors. Does this book does it address non-corporate entities? Like I know that Warren Buffett said that competent management wasn't as important to him when he was choosing whether to buy a company. What it was important to him, it was the company's ability to raise prices. And of course, Warren Buffett obviously knows a thing or two about business as well. And I'm wondering that how much of the book is geared toward folks in the corporate world where you have investors and it's publicly traded versus someone who owns something like Hershey, which is a privately held corporation?
Well, the book and my experiences with it were generally for companies that were publicly held. But you still have to, when you talk to new customers, you're going to build something for somebody, you have to describe to them what you're going to do. You have to tell them what it's going to cost. It has to be reasonable, the amounts that you tell them. And then you have to be able to do the job within the cost. I'm not going to list the 44 rules which are summarized at the beginning of the book, but the book consists basically of case histories, and in each one, as a case came up, I would be able to, after it was over and after it was solved, be able to duplicate it. What I did, without looking at the 44 rules, if I consider the general rules that are associated with these 44, I have an example for one. The importance of being profitable is one of the 4 or 5 of the rules refer to that in ways that it would affect shareholders, the ways it would affect employees. Being able, if the company is profitable, being able to have a bonus plan system is something that is very exciting to people. And you really get employees excited if you can provide incentives to them and or give them remuneration in form of stock options. So there are 4 or 5 of the rules just dedicated to that. In addition, you can be in a very happy place if you look at the employees and you look at the instructions which they're given and the directions, and you make it clear and understandable, and they can feel like you're being equal to them in your discussions rather than supervisory to them.
I know that that's one of the key points in Sam Walton's book was that he would give 10% to store managers when he was first starting out, and some of those store managers are very, very wealthy now as a result. Okay, I'm going to throw it to our Google Hangout, and Ben Nash is in there. Ben, I know you had a question for us, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your business interest, and why don't you have a go with author Coleman Raphael.
Thanks very much, Dan. Nice to meet you, Coleman. I was the one who asked Dan a little bit ago about if you had any advice for freelancers. I know he briefly touched upon that, and you did too, about the book being geared more towards public companies. So that's an ongoing question, but my second question is how do you feel about how Netflix handled their recent increase in price, and how they handled their customers and branding and image? And if you have any advice for how they could have done it better.
Unfortunately, I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable with the Netflix and with what they did that I think that I can make.
Coleman, I'll give you a quick synopsis. What happened? For too long they were criticized as the prices were too low. They were viewed as cutting edge, basically a monopoly company. A monopoly in that there isn't another company that offers what they offer at that price point. There are competitors coming up now, and that's been in the news lately. But you get to the key question is, what do you do when you have a very, very loyal following based on a superior product at a very low price point, but you've got to raise the prices because you've got to generate the profit in order to improve the product as new competitors encroach. how do you deal with that when and the basic thing was they knew they were going to anger millions of their customers and they were very loyal customers, but they were just at a point where if we're going to succeed, we're already publicly traded, so we don't have the option of going public to generate revenue. But in order to be an ongoing business model, we've got to make deals with content providers, the producers who make the shows, so that we can get these things on streaming so people can watch them on their phone or their TV or their computer. But the basic premise is when you're in a situation where your product is great, but you've got to do like a 50-60% price increase in order to remain competitive for the next year or two. How do you deal with that without? I mean, how do you make a decision like that, knowing that you will incur the wrath of millions of happy customers and perhaps lose millions of them, as is the case with Netflix?
I don't think you have much choice. Decisions that I would make, which would affect lots of people, lots of customers, and I would very often bring up in an auditorium with key management employees, not just top management, but employees in general, and discuss with them the fact that I find myself in this situation right now, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are, your recommendations, and generally you'd end up with something where reasonably bright employees agree on what it is you have to do, even if that's going to antagonize a lot of customers.
Okay, Ben, I know you had a second, and let's just keep it going with you two.
Okay, great. Back to the freelancer question. I work for myself. I'm a web designer, graphic designer, product designer, and I've worked for a variety of small firms and some large design firms as well. And after being laid off a few years ago, started working for myself again. And I did grow to a point last year where I was employing 2 or 3 people and thought about making that jump, but to more of a full-time office environment for me and my team. That did slowed down last year, so I'm back to just me and occasionally working with some other freelancers. But it seems like this model is growing tremendously in our new workforce, that all these jobs we lost aren't coming back, and everybody's going to be creating new jobs like this. And it's not, and the rule you mentioned a second ago about raising prices is very applicable to my world, of course. So I just would love to hear a few more of those rules that possibly would scale down to the smaller guys instead of the public guys.
You're talking about an activity that might just involve 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, that I would employ.
Yeah, that's somewhat different, because in the rules that I have, many of them are associated with the fact that large companies have various areas where there's immoral or illegal behavior, and this is something that management cannot accept very long. And sometimes it's with employees, sometimes it's with customers, sometimes it's with competitors or foreign companies. I have regularly encountered foreign companies that come in with unbelievable cost estimates compared to what it costs us to do a job. And you have to take a position, and in each case make a decision. Are we going to stay in this area? Are we going to fight? If we do, is our business going to drop off? Can we hope to win? And lots of that kind of analysis goes on all of the time. I find that I've found, for example, that we would look at a new area and maybe it was not going to make much money now, but it looked like there could be a nice future profit. And if there were future profit, to then give consideration, if we start making money, would that profit would we pay that profit off to employees and to shareholders, or would we establish reserves which enable us to do future forecasting based upon the money that we would have available. Lots of these kinds of decisions are discussed a little bit in the 44 rules.
Coleman, I noticed one of your chapters.
Great. Yeah. No. That.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that also applies to smaller operations as well. I often deal with those same issues with clients and other coworkers, and so yeah, I definitely will check out the book. The few items you mentioned so far definitely apply to me. So thanks.
Well, let me mention, for example, Rule 26. Rule 26. If you believe you're right, stand up and fight.
Great.
That's the whole.
You two keep going. Coleman, explain the one chapter. I've got a slight technical glitch. You had a case history, an arrogant, conceited, insolent genius. Tell me what that's about.
I'm afraid I can't remember who the example. Which chapter was that? Do you know?
That is chapter. It's page 38, chapter 3.
Let me just take one fast look, because each of these examples that I give are based on. I have changed the names, but other than that, hold on one second. Whoops. I was resting on the board. I'm not supposed to rest on this board. But that was a case history. And you see, yes, an arrogant, conceited, insolent genius. And this was, I guess it was one of the people who worked for me. And his illustrations, we just had problems in that he would feel sick. He was a perfectionist, and if something did not go very well, he'd get sick and he'd ask a doctor for help, and the doctor would then ask me what we can do in the way that we would treat him and handle this fellow. And he was single. He lived all alone. He had no girlfriends. And he got tremendous satisfaction out of accomplishing something successfully. And therefore, I took several people to cooperate with him and work with him. And it offset some of his antagonism. But that happens to be a 5 or 6 page description of a situation. The last paragraph of that section is where he stopped playing a role in the corporation and he decided to leave the company and to go down south and to start a separate business. And I often think back about him and the talent that he had and say, could I have done something more to help him get along? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't do it, and you have to accept the characteristics of an employee, which I did on occasion. That particular incident described somebody like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar too. Perfectionism is definitely can be helpful, but also get in your way, and something. Again, a freelancer has to play many roles, and it's hard to pick out what's practically possible and what you want to spend your expertise on and make perfect. So yeah, I'll definitely look forward to reading these case studies.
Coleman, let me ask you a quick question. A lot of folks have the problem of undercapitalization versus control. In other words, if you're starting a business, any sort of business, you want to have, of course, this would depend on the business and how expensive it would be. A service business often can be successful with very little startup capital, but then other businesses like a Walmart, they had to go public because they wanted to be on their business model. They wanted footprints everywhere so that they could buy more stuff at a lower price and be more competitive. But the basic question is, when you reach a situation where you can either own 100% of the company and you can have complete control versus bringing in equity either through angel investors or trying to lead up to going public, what are some of the things that should go into your thinking on this? Whether you should try to go it alone and have complete control and complete equity, or if you should try to bring folks in and then maybe you end up getting, like Thomas Edison, getting kicked out of the company you founded based on the industry you invented.
I have generally found that if there's something that I want to, whoops, did I disappear?
No, you're good. You're still here.
Oh, my picture disappeared.
That's okay. We can still see you. You can just keep going. It'll probably pop back.
Okay. Al Jacobs is looking over my back to see whether or not he knows.
He must have hit something.
He thinks I touched something on the screen. Well, if you see me, then okay. No, I have found in almost every company that I have worked with that there are some people around who are just very, very smart. Sometimes they're not very cooperative. Sometimes they're willing to be cooperative. But I have been very successful, and I look at the places where I've been successful and I say, hey, my chief financial officer in that point, in that place, or the fellow who is working on developing the new technological systems we were going to be using, is outstanding, so much better than I could ever hope to be, but he works with me and I can use him and I can reward him. And eventually I've developed very, very close relationships with people who today are retired. Very often, most of them are retired, but who I can blame on the success, or I can attribute many of the successes to other people. And I think it's very important to recognize if such people are around and then try and inspire them and reward them for not just for being friendly with you, but for enabling you to be successful.
Let's get specific on that point, because, as I said earlier, one of the great books I recommend, in addition to your book, of course, is Sam Walton's book about how he started Walmart. Now, it's an officially sanctioned autobiography, so obviously it to a degree pushes the party line at Walmart, but it's got some fascinating insights. And folks who say they're only successful because they're huge and they have buying power, that's not true, because from his very first store, when he was a franchise, he became #1 very quickly and aggressively, and at the irritation of the folks running the corporation, which was Ben Franklin, which has now evolved into sort of a niche craft retailer. But the thing is, he gave each of his managers 10% of the business. Now, what are some ways, let's say that Ben wants to attract a really talented programmer, and he wants to offer some equity in the business, make it some sort of corporate entity, and offer that person 10% or whatever percent he decides. How does he protect himself? Once if the guy signs, the man or woman signs the paper and they agree, now this person owns 10-20% of the company, Ben owns 80-90% of the company, and then once the paper is signed, the guy's great for 2 weeks and then flakes off, and now Ben is like, man, what did I do? I'm screwed. I've got this person, I'm doing all the work, he's doing nothing, and you get into this classic, the reason a lot of accountants and CPAs will warn you, don't do a partnership, do a corporation. What are some ways you can protect yourself, and what are some ways that you can give equity? What's the best way for someone on a smaller level, like Ben or myself, if we wanted to bring someone in and give them a piece of the action to motivate them, because maybe the compensation wouldn't be there initially. Maybe they're going to work on this new project for 6 months. What are some ways to grant equity to make the person really motivated and have a stake in it, but at the same time protect yourself if that person's contribution goes awry?
Uh, um, my experience has been with corporations, where not with my owning 80% of something. The individuals, I'm not sure why they generally were so happy. Well, they were happy, the people that came in. They were happy because when I had meetings of all the employees, I would bring them in order to, and tell them, let's describe what you want to do and what you think, and let's see what people think about what you are doing. And so we'll end up with some agreement that it's not just your idea, but our smart employees and our good management all agree that this makes sense. And I think one of the things I was always happy about was the fact that generally employees, both at the general working level as well as at the management level, were in agreement as to what we were doing. And if not, they were invited to express their concerns, and we would very seriously talk about the concerns and decide, if necessary, to cancel them. Rarely did I find that I overruled a lot of very smart people after giving them all the opportunity to express themselves.
Okay. Ben, did you have any final thoughts or questions?
No, I appreciate it. I also owned my own corporation many years ago while in college, and that lasted a few years, and that grew to more than 4 people. So I've been through it before, and I hope to do it again. And yeah, I appreciate even at the larger scale companies that you're doing case studies on. I think what you've talked about is applicable. So thank you.
Any final words of wisdom? I guess I can call you Dr. Raphael, right? Because you got to. I assume you went to school for a while. If you were dean of the business school, while I was at George Mason University, you were dean of the business school there. Although I wasn't. I don't think we met. Unfortunately, that would have been neat.
Really?
Yeah. So if I want to start the next big corporation or whatever, what's the path? Let's say I have a great idea and I think I want to start the next Walmart or Google or what have you. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? How do I attract people who know how to do this and who have access to venture capital or angel capital, etc.? Let's say Ben is going to invent the next Twitter and it's an awesome idea, or he's going to invent the next Walmart, tech or non-tech industry, and he's like, man, this is $1 billion idea. Where does he go to find folks where he's in other words, there's plenty of places to go, but where can he go where it's a safer route, where he's probably not going to get screwed so much?
Well, I don't think that we've been discussing activities where which involve big companies. The fact is that if I go through my experiences, that regularly when I thought that burglar alarms, for example, were not working well, and that I might be able to create a system which was more efficient in distinguishing between false alarms and actual burglar alarms, and I ended up with one other person starting a little burglar alarm company, and within a couple of years we were up to roughly 20 people, and then I sold the company to a much larger company. I've done that in a number of activities which were where you would start with just 1 or 2 people, or I would start with 1 or 2 people, and if the company looked like it went well, you'd find people who were enthusiastic about taking it from there. So even though I was talking about the big companies I was involved with, I also started a number of small companies which were very successful as they went along. I can run through some of them, but I don't know that it would pay to do it here.
All right. Well, I really, again, the book, I just had it. I'm sorry. It's One Businessman's Guide to Success. based on 44 Rules of Smart Management. It's available on Amazon.com, and I will have a link to it here. I appreciate any final words, Ben, before we conclude the interview. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, excuse me. Just as short, it's also available at Barnes and Noble and from www. Trafford, as well as Amazon.
Okay, I'll have I will. I'll Trafford is Trafford. That's the publishing house that did the book, and then Barnes and Noble and Amazon. We'll put a link underneath the book. And again, Amazon's cool because you can do a look inside. You can look at the table of contents, the first beginning chapters or anything. But anyway, Ben, any final questions or thoughts?
What kind of engineering was it that you studied or taught? I didn't catch that.
I was a civil engineer at City College in New York, and then when I was a senior, I was approached by Republic Aviation Corporation, and they said, we're looking for a structural engineer, and do you know anything about, we understand your dean said that you were a good student, and I said, well, yes, if you take a beam and you have a top and a bottom, which you call the flanges, and you connect it with a web, you can end up with what's called a structural beam. You hold one end, at the other end you apply, or you support the two ends, and you put a load in the middle. It deflects a little bit, and you have a web and you have flanges. And then he said, we have the same sort of thing in the aircraft industry. We don't call it a beam. We call it a spar. And you don't talk about flanges. You talk about spar caps. And they have webs, and they bend also, and they hold up the wing, which holds the force. So I decided I moved from civil engineering degree into aircraft structures, and I later ended up as the head of the structural department, and then finally chief engineer at the Republic Aviation Corporation.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to put a picture of the book up here. And this is One Businessman's Guide to Success, based on 44 Rules of Smart Management by Coleman Raphael, who, again, is a former board chairman and president at Atlantic Research Corporation, former dean of the business school at George Mason University, a school that he led to getting accredited, which is a big deal. In recruitment of students. I want to thank Ben for being in our Google Hangout. Thanks so much for taking time out in a Tuesday afternoon and giving us some good questions and insight into your business. And Coleman Raphael, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right. I wish you well. And the book is for sale, Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. I'll have a link underneath the video. So thanks so much for watching.